Where in our case is more like what the FBI did, infiltrating the mafia or something like that. We have to maintain a clandestine and secure relationship, but also a very healthy relationship. We have a motto in the business that says you never fall in love with your agent, but you make them think that you're in love with them. You're always ops testing them. You're always double checking. You always put them under surveillance to make sure that they're doing what they say that we're doing. But it is very different because it's a very different goal. We don't work on collars. We work on intelligence.
Well, let's use that as a good springboard to start moving forward, because a lot of your role starts changing. We start talking about the Cold War. You start talking about terrorism starts rearing its head. But at some point, you worked with Michael Schur and Alec Station, the Bin Laden unit. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I had just come back from Korea. I had just gotten my GS-15, and I was head of the Palestinian branch for CTC, our counterterrorist center. And I got called into the front office by the chief of ops, and he said, "Look, your name has been raised to be deputy chief of station for this virtual station targeting terrorism." I had never heard of virtual station. We were the first. And talking to my boss, I said, "Well, thank you, boss. I mean, of course, the deputy chief of station, hell yeah. But who are we going after?" And he said, "Osama bin Laden." And I said, "Who?" And he goes, "Exactly."
Yeah.
Mike Scheuer was the analyst that had been following this. So he was the chief of station for Alec Station. I was his deputy chief of station, and I was a senior ops officer. We only had 2 other case officers. The rest were analysts, incredible analysts and targeting officers. And by the way, that's the very same unit that eventually got bin Laden geolocated and allowed under our authorities for the SEAL team to go shoot him in the face.
Excellent. Room temperature was a good result for that, but yeah, and the sad part is too. I did some work with the State Department over in Islamabad, training their police, their Federal Investigative Agency, Special Investigative Group, and while we were there at that time, is about the time they figured Bin Laden ended up in Abbottabad, and that's just about 30 clicks north, 30 or 40 clicks north of Islamabad. Right under literally everybody's noses. I still have some heartburn over how much cooperation he got from the Pakistani government. Did you have concerns about that, or am I just off in left field here?
Probably.
No, the Pakistani government is completely dual purpose. You have people that love us and people that love to kill us, meaning Americans. They're the ones that created the Taliban, for God's sake. Their intelligence service, literally, the ISI was the ones that actually helped create the Taliban. So that penetration was always there. We did have, according to people that worked there, I never did. We did have some very good liaison relationships with some Pakistanis, but they were infiltrated from the other side too, quite a bit.
Yeah, we ended up kicking a couple people out of our training that had. Once some tenuous connections came to light, it was like, yeah, I think it spells ISI is what you should have put down as your organization. But what I'm interested in is, let's go back to that, because that, like you said, Bin Laden, who not many people took him seriously. He issued his fatwa. He said, here's what we're going to do. And then we started getting the bombings. We got some bombings of the embassies, right?
That's correct. Well, yeah, that is one of the things that set us all off, because we had when bin Laden was still in Khartoum when we opened up the station, when we started our Alec Station, and we had recorded intelligence from a very dear friend of mine, a Green Beret legend and CIA legend by the name of Billy Waugh. Billy was the head of security for Code for Black in Khartoum at the time when he was there. He's also the guy that saw and helped arrest and helped capture Carlos the Jackal, the renowned terrorist from the 70s of Europe. But he was the guy in charge of doing surveillance of bin Laden. And he had him, he knew what he was going to have for lunch. He knew what car he drove. He was in the white. He was not concerned because, in Khartoum at the time, it was like a terrorist hotel, and he was pouring all kinds of money. So we came up with several plans to kidnap him, to kill him, whatever it took. And the then administration kept saying, well, we don't have enough proof. And our argument was, we got overhead from satellites of the kind of training that he's facilitating with former jihadists in these other countries. We're getting all source information from all kinds of different governments that he's extorting money from the Saudis. He's doing this, he's doing that. He's bringing people in from Afghanistan. When, the motto of CTC is supposed to be, preempt, disrupt. This is what we do. And the administration never, ever bought off on that. And what I always tell people is that imagine in 1997 or late 96, early 97, if we would have been able to neutralize bin Laden. The coal, the bombings of our two embassies, and maybe even 9/11 could have been derailed.
And reading, and I'll give away a little bit in your book here, chapter 28, where you talk about that. You just lay it out, and I love it. The answer is clear thanks to the history and hindsight. Those 4,000 people killed in one of the U.S. Embassy attacks in Africa will still be alive today. Untraumatized, unscarred by their terrible luck, USS Cole would never have been attacked. The Pentagon would have never been hit by the American Airlines flight. The Twin Towers would still be standing. The 3,000 people who died in the World Trade Center still be with us. Families wouldn't be unaffected. It just goes on and on. It's amazing how much destruction, terrorism, chaos, anarchy he caused. And the point from all of this is that our administration at the time didn't have the cojones to take care of business.
That is the bottom.
You do a very good job explaining that in the book. I really appreciated that.
Thank you. It was definitely a fact. At the time the agency was supporting us, they were carrying our water across the river, but we were definitely not getting the traction there. And a lot of people took that very personal, especially I was chief of ops of the Counterterrorist Center when 9/11 happened. So that really stuck in my craw.
Yeah, well, I can't imagine.
Well, and there's an interesting, some of it, maybe it's a little bit lore, but when the original World Trade Center attacks happened, they tried to bomb them. The idiots, which thankfully they returned the van, they tried to report it stolen. That's how we ended up getting the guys. But one of the things that came out of this, I think that helped kind of help them with their future planning, is when they were in court, they bring in some of the structural engineers. You come to find out the World Trade Center, the Twin Towers were designed to withstand the impact of a 737. So then why are the 757s and 67s targeted? Why? Because unfortunately, that's you never know what kind of information is going to be used by somebody later. And I don't know if that helped formulate some of his planning, but it's definitely some of the stuff that came out when you find out what they're designed to withstand. And then, like you say, I think part of our failing is we tend to think too short term. Why would they think like that? That's not the point. You need to think like your adversary. Your adversary doesn't think like you. That's why they win. That's why they're able to pull off a lot of the stuff, because they're thinking differently than us. And I want to get into 9/11 and what you see there, but up until that point, what do you think was the biggest impediment other than political? Was it the way that we had been trained, that we didn't really understand Islamic law? We didn't understand what bin Laden, that he really meant the fatwa that he did. Were there some other things that contributed to this other than political?
It's political is the number one problem that you cannot run operations, military or intelligence, through an optic of politics. Okay, it's a very there's two different worlds, and at the time the politics were non-engagement. They had other problems going on. The old all it's going to do is going to really foment even more Islamic terrorism. Radical terrorism. And, at the end of the day, we're so hamstrung because, look, the Chinese have 100-year-old plans. The Russians have 50-year-long plans. We in the United States have 4-year plans, maybe 3, because by the 3rd year, you have to start campaigning to get reelected. And if there's a change, everything gets derailed. And we've seen that happen time and time again. Jimmy Carter, great person, wonderful man, very, very, Christian, blah, blah, blah. But he was a wimp. And then Reagan comes in, and all of a sudden, we get things done. So that phase for us puts us in a real handicap. They don't have to deal with Congress. I'm not saying that we shouldn't, on the contrary, but we definitely need to develop long-term strategies that benefit our country and not any political party.
Well
exactly
said.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly. Your description to your discussion, your meeting with Dianne Feinstein, who was actually a supporter of DEA at one point when she was much younger. But wow, being the head of the Intelligence Committee and her response to you guys, and for our listeners, you've got to read this book. I mean, it's really, really eye-opening. I was shocked by her response to you guys.
Yeah, that was a painful experience and a very big experience. I was already a senior grade officer. I made SIS in '98, and when we went to brief her, she was so vile and so hostile. It was incredible, but it was an eye opener about, again, more indications of how bad politics can be for our community of sheepdogs.
Yeah.
And by the way, Charlie Mann was the name of the DEA guy who wanted to recruit me, who got killed in the Charlie Mann, Mann.
Okay. Yeah, and that was before my time, but God bless him.
Yeah.
I think it was 1970.
75?
No, it was before that. The building collapsed. I was either just out of high school or senior year in high school, and I graduated in 1970. I have the photo and the write-up. I'll send you a photocopy of that.
Yeah. Let's talk about now 9/11, because so many of us have got some intersection with it. You are at the center of the universe on this stuff. Some of the other people, I've told them this before. I was in the Reagan building. We're supposed to be in the Pentagon meeting switch, so I'm in the Reagan building when the planes hit. And I remember walking across the bridge, seeing the Pentagon burning. When the first plane hit, hey, there's something wrong here. Then the second one, it was obvious. But when 9/11 happened with you, what clicked? What changed? Because the easiest way for things to happen is for people to get religion. Well, one way to get religion is for a bad incident to happen. People go, "Yeah, we should have done that." I don't want to get engaged in like we told you so type of stuff. But it was almost like, did any part of your head go, "Man, we told you so"? We were hoping that this wouldn't happen, but we told you so. And then how did you respond? How did things change once 9/11 happened? How did it change in terms of op tempo, priorities? What they were willing to do to take the politics out of it and do what needed to be done?
And that's an excellent question, an excellent example of the way things can be done. The agency got tapped directly by the president to, pay back for 9/11, figure out who it was, go out there and target them. And a lot of people don't realize that the first boots on the ground in Afghanistan wasn't the Green Beret guys. Love them to death. I have some in the family, but it was my guys that we sent, guys like Mike Spann, several others, that were the first guys in and vector those helicopters in. So the agency, this was a resurrection of the agency yet again. The Contra program was the first one. And now this again really put a lot of authorities on active. Our president then, Bush, signed on 17 September. He signed a lethal finding that allowed us to do whatever we needed to do to neutralize this threat. And it all goes into the politics. We have Title 50 authorities, which means we are allowed to do anything outside of the United States that the President of the United States authorizes us to do or directs us to do. So the gloves came off. We started, we got into Afghanistan. We helped the military come in. We started neutralizing the Taliban. We started hitting these guys with drones. I personally, there's a story in the book where I blew up 17 of these Alpha hotels. So the gloves were off. But here was the biggest tipping point for me. I had grown up seeing local terrorism, then international terrorism, and understanding that preventing and disrupting terrorist operations is what's really all about. And we did not have that for 9/11. We knew that something was happening, every indication. They had gone radio silent, which was a big tip off. They kept talking about weddings and all this kind of stuff. They honey, which used to be for things for explosives. They called it honey. These were key words. We know something big was going on, but we couldn't pinpoint it and we couldn't disrupt it. So what came out of 9/11, besides a very robust response by CTC and CIA writ large in the war in Afghanistan and in the military, of course, is I came up with a program that was meant to derail exactly this. My concept, and I briefed Vice President Cheney and Condoleezza Rice. It's all in the book. But the Reader's Digest version of it is the concept was to make book on 2 or 3 individuals from the support side of the house of every terrorist group and even some narcotics groups we were contemplating. The idea being that, the leaders are hard to get at. The shooters are a dime a dozen. But the support individuals, they're the soft belly of any illegal organization, whether it be terrorists or narcotics.
The money people, the money people, the logistics, the support, anything that makes those things happen.
Exactly. They're the movers and shakers, but they have to have a public persona. You cannot do that from a cave in Afghanistan. So what we did was we identified 3 Hezbollah, 3 Al-Qaeda, 3 this, that, and the other. And we sent out my guys. I actually quit the chief ops job and became special investigations team or something like that. We were out there literally in first, second, and third world countries, getting patterns of life on these guys and developing operational scenarios. The concept being, using Hezbollah as an example, Hezbollah had killed more Americans than any other terrorist organization prior to 9/11.
Including, was it 243 Marines?
Yep, one of them my first karate student, as a matter of fact. The concept being that if all of a sudden we start getting chatter from Hezbollah that something's going on, the indicators, peripheral sources are identifying that, liaison services are identifying that. What do you think happens to an organization if all of a sudden 3 of your key support mechanisms get shut down? And we had 3 options. Compromise them, put drugs in their car, put explosives in their cars, call the cops, duct tape them, do a rendition operation, or just shoot them. What would an organization that all of a sudden has 3 of their people in different places all wrapped up at the same moment? They're going to hit the brakes because they're going to think they're penetrating. Mm-hmm. So that was the concept that I developed. We had the team, we delivered. We had a very robust operational scenarios for several real bad guys that needed to be neutralized, like we should have done with bin Laden one way or the other, whatever the president decided was legal. But we delivered on all that, but they never allowed us to neutralize any of the targets. And after my second briefing, and there's an explanation of that in the book too, with Pavitt, Jim Pavitt was our DDO, and the DCI, George Tennant, that I briefed on a very sophisticated operation that we had sweated all the details. And at the end, the DDO says, Mr. Director, there's no doubt in our mind, that Prado and his guys not only can do this, but they can get away with it. I'm ready to do high fives, right? Then he says, however, we have to look at the political implications of doing this now. I retired 60 days later.
Oh, geez.
That was, and you outline that in the book. I'm looking at the page right here in my hand as you're talking, and it just drains the wind out of your sails, hearing that they back off when it's time to take action like that. And it's not that we want to be murderers here in the United States. We're trying to protect Americans. That's what this whole thing's about. I mean, we're talking about true American heroes and patriots here that are doing everything they can to protect us, and we let politics get in the way.
And that is the problem. And look, we're at war with terrorism. We're at war with communism. We have it so good in this country that we don't know, not only know how good we have it, but we don't understand the real threats that are out there. Our soldiers, they can kill somebody in a combat zone, right? If you're a police officer and somebody shoots back at you and tries to resist or something, whatever it is, you are allowed to neutralize that target. We, as U.S. government writ large, how many people have we killed with drones? Quite a few. Well deserved, don't get me wrong. The problem is my program, the one that I try to put together, or the one that I put together, we had, like you said, real good Americans on the ground in dangerous areas, surveilling these guys, photographing these guys, getting patterns of life of these guys, but we were not allowed to neutralize them. And that's another handicap. You cannot fight a war unless you are neutralizing the enemy. And in war, there's only one way to neutralize the enemy is to take them down.
Well, perfect example is after 9/11, our country galvanized. We all came together. Man, we were so ticked off. I was living up in D.C. at the time, and there were American flags hanging from every bridge out on the toll roads. It didn't matter where you went. There people had taken bed sheets and America Strong, and everybody was on the same page of music. But man, we have such short memories. Once it was no time at all before people started going back the other way. It's like, well, I mean, do we got to be nice to these people. It's like a lot of cops think you got to give the bad guy the first shot. They got to be able to shoot at you first before you can respond. That's not the law at all. It just boggles your mind. And there's so many good do-gooders in our country here. Go visit and live in a foreign country for just a short amount of time, and then come back to the United States and tell me what you think then, because I think you'll change your position.
Oh, I am convinced of that, and I can definitely vouch for that. But to clarify a point, it wasn't the administration that did not approve this, because remember, I briefed the Vice President of the United States and Condoleezza Rice, and their word was, "Go, get it done. You let us know before you pull the trigger. We will brief the right people in Congress. But once you have a final ops plan, come back to us." It was CIA administration that unfortunately had lost their backbone through politics. George Tenet, a lot of people think that he was a good director, but a very, very good friend of mine who was very close to him said to me one day when this topic came up, he says, "He's not a wartime consigliere." He was great for the, sub-Russell political stuff and everything that went around. But when you are at war, and we were at war post 9/11, for a while anyway, you have to have a somebody who knows how to fight, who's got the courage to go on the line. And what was told to me by again, people in the know, was that they were more concerned, agency management, with the fact that, look, if this thing is a success, if Prado and his team are a success, we can't get the credit for it. The agency will not be able to say, "Yeah, we did that." But if it fails, they're the ones that go to jail.
What's that old saying?
Get the blame.
Yeah, success has many fathers, but failure is an orphan.
Yeah,
that's correct.
People, hey, well, let me ask you a couple things. So throughout, you might remember these guys. I ran into him, got to talk with him. I said, "What a fascinating job." Jonathan Terry used to do the PDB for Cheney during this time. His son and my son wrestled together. But I got to know, does the name Glenn Gaffney ring a bell?
No, it doesn't. Glenn
was the director of DS&T, and then he became an assistant director, I believe, maybe after you left. But you were talking about patterns of life. I was having a discussion with him. I think he was 30 years at the agency, but was on the Directorate of Science and Technology and those guys. But I loved what you said, and I wish we would incorporate this more. You were talking about patterns of life, looking at stuff. I'm working with him on a different project, but it was like, he says, look, used to tell his people, if the rules of the game aren't working for you, change the game. Too often we want to look at the rules as like, if you really want to disrupt stuff, dude, change the game. Don't play by their rules. That's the problem we've had. And my quick turn for rant, because I had some friends in the agency, we talked about some of this. One of the biggest things they saw is nobody wanted to take a risk anymore. Lawyers got involved. People were being pulled before Congress and being hammered. And it was like, we're trying to do good here, and we're spending all our time getting targeted, when they were told, hey, we're going to come after you CIA people for these enhanced interrogation techniques. That's bad. You guys shouldn't have done that. I mean, how soul sucking is it to be doing your job and have elected political leaders like the president of the United States saying, "Hey, if you did these things, we're going to come after you. Quit doing that kind of shit because, we're going to start putting people in jail for stuff like this."
Yeah, and the very clear thing when we were authorized not only by the president, but also DOJ bought off and approved the methods. And what people don't understand that what was carried out is not torture. It's called enhanced interrogations. And all of us who are special in the military go through a course called SEER. SEER school is exactly that. They don't let you sleep for days. They don't feed you. They slap you around. They don't let you sleep. They're playing loud music. I spent, I don't know how many days, could have been 3, could have been 5, in a phone booth sized box with two cans, one to pee in and the other one to poop in, and getting interrogated 2 or 3 times a day. That's what we put our special people through to prepare them. If they get compromised, this is the best that can happen to them, because it's actually worse. So yeah, the politics again kicked in, and it was a change of an administration, and all of a sudden, those were the kind of things that they could really throw a lot of mud at.
And just to throw out there, Morgan, you mentioned the PDB. For our listeners, that's the president's daily briefing.
Oh, I'm in trouble. We're supposed to define acronyms, and there I went violating one of my own rules.
Shame on you. Drink.
I will drink 2 beers tonight instead of 1 as punishment for that. But Rick, let me ask you this, because we're going to be closing. We want to be respectful of your time. But the other thing too is we intentionally wanted to record this so that we could get this out on 9/11. This episode is going to drop on Monday, 9/11. Let's kind of talk about as after you finished. But now that you can reflect back on it, now that you kind of free of certain things, you're unencumbered with certain things that you can say. What is going on in the world right now, and what do we need to be concerned about that we're not keeping our eye on the ball? I think we've taken our eye off the ball on several things for a long time. For example, like China. I don't want to say Iran but I think we've pissed away some advantages we've had with Iran. And I grew up there when my dad was military. I lived under the days of the Shah. Talk about a country that has completely changed. What's the big picture now? If you were given a briefing, let's say to senior people in businesses and governments and stuff, what would be your message? What is going on in the world right now we're missing the ball on?
We're missing the ball on the fact that they are real predators out in the world. And they do want to destroy us. The Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, radical Muslim terrorism have one goal, and that's to dominate. We don't understand that as Americans, because we have such a beautiful, albeit fragile democracy, or we cannot conceptualize what the enemy is willing to do. And this is something that I've taught for years when I was working with the folks overseas. You cannot judge operations by your morality. You have to look at operations by the morality of your enemy. They will take, and this happened to us in Iraq. They took a guy that had clearance to go into the green zone. They took his son. They took his daughter. They shot his daughter, and said, "If you don't put this device in the compound, we're going to shoot your kid." I could never do that. For God and country, I couldn't do that. But you have to understand that our enemy does. And I mentioned it earlier. You cannot run military or intelligence operations through a political optic. Have the courage to cry havoc and let slip the dogs of war, because that's what we are. We can go in there, take care of a problem. Perfect example, if somebody could have shot Hitler in 1939, or if somebody could have shot Fidel Castro in 1970-something, or if we would have been able to neutralize bin Laden in 1996, 97, we'd be living in a very different world with any of those 3 phenomena. So,
you make a great point, because there were initiatives to, I think, a little bit too late, but you still had the plot to kill Hitler, which the movie Valkyrie is about, but real people decided they didn't want this. I know we tried several times with Castro. People look at it and they go, "Oh, well, you can't do that. That's not fair." You know what's not fair? killing 243 Marines, killing 3,000 Americans. You listed it out in your book so much. That's what's not fair. We got to get rid of this concept of fair. I had a political science professor tell me fair, it doesn't exist. Fair is a place you go ride rides and then have cotton candy. We got to quit thinking of this concept of the word fair. Let me give you kind of a last word, because we want to talk about some of the stuff you're doing now, but let's say that the government was able to seduce you and bring you back to say, look, we want you to create policy to do things differently. I had a concern that maybe we got too attached to technology, like, ELINT, electronic intelligence, signals intelligence, but we've kind of lost our way with human intelligence. Did they not, let me ask you that, just throw that out there for you to talk about. Are we doing everything we can? Or if Ric Prado was in charge, you were king, you were in charge for 6 months or whatever it would take, what would you do differently to make CIA and even other organizations more effective in delivering the kind of results we need to make a safer America?
Well, the first thing is take the politics out of it. The second is grow some backbone and pride for your country. Third is realize that our enemies are trying to kill us. It's not a concept. They would love to destroy us as a country or as individuals. Let us do what our charters are. It's like you guys with law enforcement, right? You don't need new laws. You need to be allowed to enforce the laws that are already in the book.
Hallelujah, brother. That's me and Murph raising our hands going, hallelujah.
Absolutely.
Hallelujah. And in the agency, we know our charter. We know what we're capable. We've demonstrated it with the Contras. We demonstrated it with post 9/11. The agency can cowboy up and get things done. But you got to let them loose. You got to protect them. Because what happens is, when you were talking about enhanced interrogations, it hit home, because the guy that really bore the saddle on this was Jose Rodriguez. Jose Rodriguez is one of my best friends. He was the DDO at one time.
I got his book. I actually had a chance to meet him down at Fox News. Great.
Well, him and I are actually neighbors, so that's how far back we go with big motorcycle riding for decades. But anyway, Jose got wrapped into this whole thing and literally destroyed him for quite a while, until he was able to extricate himself out of it and prove him not guilty and everything else. But the bottom line is, you cannot fight a war through Queensberry rules. Right. If your enemy is an MMA, mixed martial arts expert, you're going to get your butt kicked every single time. You have to be able to do the same things with the same ferocity, but with a higher morality, because we are the United States. We do have that Christian concept. But absolutely, if I was king for a day, I would allow our respective agencies to first be politics be taken out of it. In the case of the CIA, we have guys like Cofer Black. We got guys like Jose Rodriguez that could be our DCIs. Those are the kind of people that you want as directors of an agency, people that have been on the streets, that understand what our concepts are, not a political appointee who owes his or her alliance to the administration. The alliance of a leader of any organization is their people. So I honestly believe if we depoliticize the situation and we allow, under the legal charters that we enjoy, to actually go after our enemies and let them know that we're here. And I think that's something we have lost over the years.
Agree 100%.
Yeah. I don't want to say I had an argument, but I had a vigorous discussion with somebody whose political leanings were quite different than mine, but they were talking, here's what we ought to do. I said, let me ask you a question. I said, how do you negotiate? And how would you negotiate with somebody whose opening premise is, I want to kill you? Where do you go from there?
Perfect example. And that is exactly what it is. And this is why I said, look, Jimmy Carter is the perfect example of, I don't like talking politics. That's not my thing, but I like history like you. Yeah. Jimmy Carter was a good man, former military admiral, honest, he wasn't corrupt, good Christian, everything was there, except he came across as food. He was vacillating. He did it with the rescue of our
the Iranian hostages
during Iran and everything else. So But look what happened during his short administration. We lost the Panama Canal. The Russians invade Afghanistan. The Iranians take our hostages for 444 days. What happened when Ronald Reagan took over? Within 24 hours, our hostages in Iran were released. Why do you think that is?
Mm-hmm.
Because they knew that this guy was going to use the hammer. And the same way as you guys working undercover with a perp, they got to look at you across the table and go, if I mess with this guy, he's going to bite me back.
Well said. Well said.
I can keep doing this for another couple of hours, but we can't do that. But we want to talk about, first of all, this is us saluting you and me saluting you, saying thank you for your service to our country, especially somebody who comes from Cuba and knew what it was like. I mean, looking out your window, seeing automatic weapons. I never saw an automatic weapon until I was at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. First time I saw one, I was a Kansas farm boy. We saw 22 rifles, and 308s. But anyway, I say that to say this is that we're so proud of what you did, but I'm very proud of what you continue to do because Murph has a saying, and I'll let you say what it is, Murph, before I ask him my question.
About cops?
No, about the oaths.
About what?
Oaths. Do you understand the words coming out of my lips?
Not very well today. But we do have a saying, Rick, that just because we retired does not mean that our oaths expired. And you're a living example of that. And that's why we want everybody to know what you're doing now.
Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. And the respect is mutual. And so is the salute. One of the things that when I left the agency, I went to Blackwater for 6 years. Actually, more than that. Doing the same thing. As a matter of fact, I was vice president for special government programs. That even the FBI will call that a clue.
I don't mean to interrupt you, Rick, but you got to tell us how you got to Blackwater, because I read it in the book and it's hilarious.
Yeah, it was funny because what happened was when 9/11 happened, we needed security in Kabul. And State Department, of course, was exploding with, trying to protect all the embassies. So they said, we need to bring in some privateers. Our executive director, Buzzy Krongard, a very dear friend, a big supporter of my programs. I wish he had been my boss at the time. His son was a SEAL. He opened up SEAL Team 7. He introduced Eric Prince in Blackwater to the agency, and that was the first security detail that went into Afghanistan. Was a Blackwater, and Eric Prince was part of it. Even though he was the boss, he was actually part of the detail. And then what happened when I started that special program at the end of my career, I didn't want to train in our Black facilities, because if they see a guy with my background and my reputation with a bunch of meat eaters doing all this rappelling upside down kind of stuff, they're going to say something's going on. So I went to Eric and I said, we want to do some specialized training, but nobody can know who we are, what our names are. And that's how I got to be friends with Eric. He saw what we were doing. And when I retired, he says, I want you to come to Blackwater and I want you to do this for God and country. You're going to be our moral conscience for the operations. I will tell you, I did as much during my years of Blackwater as I did in the agency, and had a lot more fun because I didn't have the political bullshit to deal with.
Yeah, but initially you turned him down, and who recommended you for that job when you were at some event?
God, you did read the book. Yeah, what happened was, I was so heartbroken when I left the agency. I've been doing that for years. I did 24 years in the agency, pararescue before that. And I was exhausted. I had 3 years of flying all over the place, helping my guys chase these guys. So when he first pitched me, I said, look, I'm kind of burned out. I need a break.
Hold on. I love what you just said. Here's the CIA term. When he pitched me, it's like he's trying to turn you from the government side to the dark side.
Exactly. Well, that's what he pitched me. But what happened was Eric used to sponsor this event. It was called the Gold Cup, and I love horses, and he knew that. So he always invited me and my wife to go to the Gold Cup. And we're sitting there at the Gold Cup, and Eric comes up, and my wife, who's usually very shy, Eric puts his arm around me, hey, how you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And my wife looks at him and says, Eric, please give him a job. He's driving me out.
You gotta love him.
And Eric looked at me and goes, really? I said, yeah. He says, let's have lunch tomorrow. And that's what he recruited me for the long term.
I love that story.
I think your wife was a co-conspirator in this initiative to get you on board with Blackwater.
Yeah, she probably got some money on the side from Eric to
resourceful lady.
I think we call that a bump, don't we? Was that not a bump there, Rick?
That's the way it all starts.
Hey, but you're involved in some other stuff too. We were talking about kids, and I mean, you still got some stuff doing some training like Camp X. I mean, you've got the solo operator course. I looked at that as like, oh my God, that would be so much fun to do. 5 days learning how as a solo operator with basically just a sidearm, but surviving. You're doing some, I mean, stuff that just I start getting goosebumps when I look at this. But I like the stuff you're doing with kids. What are you doing there?
Well, the two things that I've been engaged with, first of all, there was a big transition in the military from kinetic options to actually being able to operate clandestinely for our special operations forces, which means move it into my world. So the whole concept of a lone operator is that now you have special operations guys that have to get rid of all their kit. They have to blend in. They learn to use disguise, learn to use surveillance detection, and be very proficient in firearms, handguns, not M4s, knives, not guns, because sometimes you're in places where you could not carry a gun. The clandestine aspect, the fact that if you draw your weapon during an operation in the clandestine world, you've blown the operation even if you survive it. So that was a lot of fun because, working for several years with the special operations, I taught at Fort Bragg, our soft guys, at advanced special operations and techniques course for 7 years. And then with these guys, we were doing all the good kinetic concealed carry, real concealed carry, and how to take a gun from a military person so you could use it in a third world country, whatever. The second effort that you referred to is ARC, is Association of the Rescue of Children. And I do this pro bono. I'm on their board of directors, and I provide overseas connectivity based on my substantial network that I built through the years at Blackwater, and somewhat the agency also. And ARC, that's what they do. It's a nonprofit. Basil Baz is the guy who conceptualized it and ran it. Basil is a former Force Recon guy who came to the agency as a paramilitary officer, PMO. Did about 10 years and then went to Hollywood for a while, and then he started this organization. And it's done some good work. It's done some good work retrieving kids over, that have been kidnapped and taken overseas and or preventing. So very proud of those two.
No higher calling than that right there. We've had a couple other folks on here just recently. Ty Holland from Operation Underground Railroad, who's a retired police officer from Seattle, describing he was our guest on episode 113. And we've had victims on here who were victims of Natasha Herzig was a victim of human trafficking and sex trafficking. And we're doing our best to bring more attention to that particular topic now that the movie Sound of Freedom is out and people are aware of what's going on. So, I found out this about you on your LinkedIn profile, and there's no higher calling than what you're doing right there. I'm just so proud that you're involved with that.
Thank you very much. We are too. We all have children, and when
Yep.
these kids go through that, their lives will never be the same again. Even if we rescue them, the experience has to be something that will scar you for life.
Yeah. Hey, quick question before we close out. Did you ever work with the First Capabilities Integration Group?
No.
Interesting. They've got an interesting background too. A lot of the stuff you're doing. Anyway, let's do this. Let's bring this to a close. And first of all, this is a high honor. First of all, for somebody who served the way you did in the places you were, and I mean that literally. It's like I've got friends from the agency, and when they can, the things that they can talk about, we're only scratching the surface. We're only getting 5% of what you probably did. And by the way, your book, I love. You left the redactions in. It's kind of like, fuck you. I'm okay. It's there. I just can't talk about it, but you left the redactions in there. So I like that. People can do a little bit of sleuthing and maybe figure out a couple things, but I can't tell you how much we appreciate you taking your time and how important this was. we got this recorded. We had some technical challenges. We all overcame those. We figured it out. Because I wanted this to come out on 9/11, and I wanted people just to keep it in their forefront. Is don't let time, erase these memories. Don't get fatigued by the fact, here we go again. Now that's what our enemies count on, is for us. To your point, we got adversaries that thinks in terms of generations. We think in terms of elections, and we got to start changing our thinking. But again, us saluting you, Ric.
Yeah, and Ric, before we'll give you the last word here, brother, but I love the fact that you point out the difference between Hollywood and the real CIA. We being my old DEA partner, when we were in Bogota, Colombia, we had a run-in with the chief of station, and that tainted our view of CIA. But we give you guys a hard time. But we also explained to our audiences that was one person. That was not the entire agency. The CIA gets such a bad rap because it's a secret agency, and you can't divulge what's going on, or it would affect the security of our country. So it's easy for politicians, especially the media, to get up and badmouth you guys, when in reality and in truth, you're all freaking heroes. You're all American patriots. You've dedicated your life to serving Americans to protect us here in our homeland. So God bless you, brother. There's just no higher calling than you were willing to give your life for your fellow man. So a salute's not good enough. I hope that you and I have the opportunity someday to share a couple of good Cuban cigars and talk crap about Morgan and just get to know each other better. And I want to personally thank you for everything you've done for our country.
Well, it's my honor. It would be my honor to get together with you guys. I salute you right back, because you obviously, you have, national security is a team sport. Mm-hmm. Everybody plays a role in it, from the cop on the street to the head of a federal agency. So I'm very proud of that. And I would like to add to what you said about the agency. The thing that keeps me really, really humble is that for all the years in the agency and in pararescue, I must admit, I walked in the shadow of giants. Guys who did so much, and that I was so honored that to even be able to talk to them. So yes, I'm very proud of what I've been able to do for God and country. It was my debt of honor to this country. But at the same time, I don't let it go to my head, because I know personally guys like Billy Waugh and Dewey Claridge and people that have done so much more to play that team sport and save American lives.
Real heroes.
Real heroes. Well, hey, we're going to close this out, but we did this especially for 9/11. We want to never forget September 11th, 2001. Never forget what people like Ric and other people were doing to defend and protect our country. And I'll just leave you with this: get the politics out of it. Let us get back to doing what we do well at all the different levels and keep America safe. So this is us saluting you again. We're bringing this to a close. Don't go anywhere, Ric and Steve. Hang on. Everybody else, stay tuned for the debrief. I just, listening to his stories and stuff, I still get goosebumps. We got goosebumps while we were talking with him. Mm-hmm. And you even mentioned that. I mean, and look, what can you say? Here's somebody who was willing. You talk about operating in the jungles against the Sandinistas. His life was literally in danger every moment. They had people in the camps that were looking to identify and find the people that are working for the government, the CIA. And had it not been for a little bit of a hiccup, he would have been in one of those ambushes. They've lost people. So, man, I just salute him. And look, you got to go read his book, Black Ops. This, and we have it. It's on our website too, and you can go to Ric Prado, RICPRADO.com. It's called Black Ops: The Life of a CIA Shadow Warrior. This thing was #1 on the New York Times when he said he sold, I think, 75 or 80,000 copies of this book already. That's phenomenal for a book like this.
Absolutely. You get an insider's look. And it's one of those books when you start reading it, it's hard to put it down, because you want to see what the next adventure is. When you were talking about him working down there with the Contras against the Sandinistas, keep in mind, he's out there by himself. And at that point, when he first started doing it, he wasn't even an employee of the CIA. He was a contractor.
With no training. Here's a gun, go into the jungle and do some shit.
Now, he was a pararescue guy in the military prior to that. So, I mean, this guy's a stud all the way through. He grew up a little bit of a tough life, the way he came over from Cuba. But just, I have the utmost respect for Rick. I can't thank you enough, Rick, for coming on the show. If you're listening to this, support this man through his book, and let's see what he does next.
And just remember, this episode comes out on September 11th, 2023, the 22nd anniversary of 9/11. And Murph, you read from the book, you read the figures that Rick got in his book, the number. If we had taken out bin Laden when we had the chance, and should have, how many lives would have been saved? It's incalculable. But we know at least 343 plus 34 plus almost 3,000 just on 9/11.
Yeah.
Over 3,000 when you consider Pennsylvania, when you consider the Pentagon, you consider the Twin Towers, the firefighters, the Port Authority of New York. When you can just those lives right there, and not including all of the people that have died because of responding to that, the cancers, the diseases. Anyway, it's hard to put into words. So this is us again saluting you, Rick. You may not see us, but here we are saluting you again, and hope you guys enjoyed this. This was for us a very important episode to put out on. So part 2 came out on Tuesday, but part 1 came out on Monday, September 11th. Never forget the 22nd anniversary of 9/11.
Absolutely. Everybody, thank you so much. Quick shout out to my oldest son, Josh. Today, 9/11 is his birthday. That's a birthday I'll never forget.
Yeah.
But thank you for joining us, everyone.
And thank you guys once again. As you see here, this is one of the world's most dangerous things. So thank you for playing once again the biggest, baddest, most dangerous game of all, the Game of Crimes.